Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our very first stream and episode of Unwritten Rules of the Road. I am Tosh, and with me today is an incredible special guest and very dear friend of mine, Mr. Jon Siren. Hi, Jon.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm excited to be here.
I will describe Jon as what I consider to be a multi-hyphenated artist. He's not only a drummer, but he's also an amazing songwriter. He authored the book, The Touring Vegan. You also are an amazing chef and a personal trainer. Is there anything else that I'm missing from the hyphens?
Um, well, that's about it probably for now. Yeah. I mean, the personal training thing kind of came about recently, but yeah, that's probably it.
That's really amazing. I mean, do you think you were inspired from having written The Touring Vegan to kind of include in your offerings?
Um, yeah, that I think I mean I think so because yeah, with writing the book, one of the things that I talk about in the book too is, if you're gonna kind of go down this path that seems sort of a fringe path, I want to be a good example of that. So physical fitness has been very important, throughout that process. I mean, it's one of the multiple reasons why I'm into training myself. And then because I've been doing it for so long, I over the pandemic, I started training friends of mine, and then that led into sort of a side hustle where I do that in addition to the drumming.
I know for a fact that you went to culinary school, so you have a really amazing background in nutrition and awareness of health. Like kind of like in if you for a person new to the touring vegan, which I personally love the recipes in there. Like, can you kind of give us an overview of the book?
Yeah, I mean the book is pretty much my own story. I sometimes have a hard time discussing veganism too much with people because it's going into ethics, my personal beliefs and everything like that. I mean, there's oftentimes people think that vegans are sanctimonious, um, and that's never been the case for me. Maybe as a very young vegan who's a teenager, but you're pretty edgy in general at that point. Um, so yeah, I mean, nutrition. Sorry, can you go back to the question again? I was
Oh no, I mean just like kind of I guess what inspired you to share like the touring vegan, like to write it and to share what your knowledge is about health and nutrition.
okay. Yeah, yeah. So, I decided to write the book because I felt that I could put it in words better than explaining it sometimes with people. Because often, people would confront me, in my younger days of doing it and try to, challenge my belief system. And so I felt like, okay, well, if I can articulate myself a little bit more and choose my words carefully, putting it in a book format might be a better way to kind of express myself. And I could always be like, hey, check out my book instead of, but I mean, nowadays I feel like I can discuss things a little bit more. So I'm not really afraid to, if anyone, no one's really confronting me too much on it, but, occasionally people will ask about it, and sometimes they'll even try to challenge me on it. So, yeah.
Well, I really have always loved and respected your approach in terms of like you're like this is something that has worked for me, and obviously you're an example of somebody who's very healthy and is able to be on the road as we know from being touring musicians. It is not easy. It is a very physically challenging lifestyle to say the least. You
Absolutely.
know.
Yeah. I mean, being on the road in general and trying to be healthy, let alone, being a vegan where you have less options when it comes to restaurants. I mean, it's more understood now. So often if there's catering at the venue, they're no stranger to the vegan lifestyle at this point. But definitely it wasn't the case, several years ago when I first started doing this. And it was definitely a lot more challenging. But I think it's challenging in general to remain healthy on the road. You're not getting proper sleep. You have to kind of work in exercise like I try to, in addition to performing. And then also, yeah, eating right. Because often you'll be at a truck stop and people will just go and buy the food at a truck stop, which is always pretty lousy. It's either a fast food restaurant or what you would see in a convenience store. So, access to good, healthy food and staying consistent with it becomes a challenge, and you have to figure out a way to travel since, and if you're going to be doing this for multiple tours throughout the year, you might be spending most of your time on the road. And so you can't just neglect your health, or you won't be in the game for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, you brought up an interesting topic. I just wanted to kind of touch base on that. What was your very first live show and what was your very first tour? Like, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I first tour, it's a challenging one because I was playing some, small groups of shows um out of town with my band in high school. One of my bands, we were called Medium, and we would do maybe 2 or 3 dates, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday type of thing. Um, and so I don't know if one would call that being on tour. I think my most substantial tour early on was with a group called Inept, and we would do like 2 weeks in the summer, something like that, where we would play regionally around Ohio. But in some cases, we went further south and we went to the East Coast. I know that we played in New York and DC and places like that. Um, so yeah, those were my first gigs, and that was a long time ago. So that was in the probably 1997. So yeah, do the math. Not
Well, did you do the booking for these particular tours?
those tours, but the person who booked those, but I was the youngest person in those groups, and Scott and Mike, they were the ones who actually booked all of those, and they were also promoting shows in Columbus, Ohio. So they had a lot of connections with bands and other venues and promoters. And I saw what they were doing. And I believe there was something too, like there was like a booklet called Book Your Own Life. And I think it ended up being a website at one point in the early stages of the internet. Um, and yeah, so they were using that as well too, where bands and promoters and bookers, they all put their information in this sort of catalog, so that other people could look at it and be like, oh, there's somebody in Duluth, let's go contact them because we're driving in that area and it'd be great to have a show, and like let's see if there's other bands, maybe we can put something together. And then bands would do favors for one another, like if I played in, yeah, Duluth or something like that with this group, then they might, we might get them a show in Columbus, Ohio. So that's kind of how that worked out. And I saw them do that. And then that really gave me the blueprint on how to do things when I was booking tours for Mankind is Obsolete, several years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see how you applied that. I've been doing the same for Alice, and there's a really cool Facebook group called DIY Tour Postings. That it's similar. It's a similar vibe in the sense that it's like it's a collection of different people who are like, okay, I'm in Duluth, and I play this style of music, and let's see about like if we can trade shows or help each other out, that sort of thing. So. I think that ideology definitely continued.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people will ask me. I'm not booking anything these days, and I haven't for several years. But often people will say, "Well, how do I get a show? How do I do this or how do I do that?" And I just keep going back to that sort of um, method, because I really can't think of other ways unless you've jumped a few steps ahead and maybe you have a nice team backing you, and therefore you probably have a booking agent or access to one at that point. But if you're trying to get your voice heard and get out there, I would really look to trade, I guess, trading favors on some level, with other groups, try to find other like-minded people in different cities and and do trades with them. And I remember with Mankind is Obsolete too, it's just like when we were starting that, um we brought our PA system with us. So it's sort of like, oh, you don't have a PA, or this is just a place where you could hold a show, but there's no PA. Well, no problem. We've got our own PA. We just need power and a place where they'll let us be loud. And so that was the mindset, and we went with that.
Yeah, for sure. Going back to like early tour life for you versus tour life now, like what would you say the difference is for you? Like, I mean, at this point, I'm sure you have a system that's dialed in, right? But like, like go back to like first tour versus like the tour that you're about to do next. Like, what is
Yeah,
what
I
is
mean,
your prep process, and what are the differences in terms of what it's actually like?
oh, there's so many differences on just an individual level. Like I really care about the presentation and my drumming. Not that I didn't care back then, but I think that the bar was a bit lower for me in my younger days. I was like, I didn't really think so much about, but there was also not YouTube and things where you're getting video of how you sound and look, and you're like, oh, that's dreadful or something like that, and I need to work on my timing or something. I'm a drummer, or so I practice quite a bit more. That's only grown in years. I mean, there's times where you have to be really efficient with your practicing, but I definitely focus a lot more on being prepared well in advance. And often band leaders who bring me on to their tours will change their minds quite often too. So it's good to really know the catalog as best as possible, because they might swap out songs even in the middle of a tour. And I've had it often where I don't even know the song because maybe I joined a band that already has a catalog of 5 or 6 records, and I knew some of the material, but I didn't know all of the songs and all the drumming for it. So that certainly has happened too. So I mean, I try to be very much prepared because I've been in enough situations where you're in the hot seat, and I don't like that feeling. I don't think anyone does. So, I mean, it can be exciting and thrilling because you're like, oh, wow, am I going to pull this off? Maybe it's a really big show you're pulling up to. I remember an IMX situation where Chris wanted to bring in Nightlife, a track that the band had played often before, but I hadn't played it yet. And IMX songs aren't even exactly like the album as far as the arrangement goes for live. So, we just had sort of a huddle in the front lounge of the bus as we were driving to the show. And and he sort of explained what he wanted. And I kind of listened to, a headphone. And I mean, it wasn't overly complicated as far as what I needed to do, but I had to nail these parts down. So I'm writing notes and just kind of getting it together. But yeah, sometimes you'll be in that position. But anyway, long story short, the best thing to do is just be as prepared as you can, kind of reeling it back in. And that is a big difference between now and the original days of touring for me. I guess that would be the biggest difference. I'm sure there's other differences as well.
Yeah. It sounds like it's like, in terms of like just the music alone, it's like I feel like because it feels like, you're like, okay, like I have to prepare this much more because you like feeling a certain way when you're going on stage and when you're touring. Um, because yes, there is something to be said for feeling like I'm ready, as opposed to I think this is the song and this is where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's actually somewhat exciting to be in the hot seat. I don't know if that's
Mhm.
some sort of masochistic side of me, where you're like, ooh, can I pull this off? Maybe it's some ego move on my end. But to be honest, I mean, it feels much better going into it, being confident and very sure of what you're going to do. and have rehearsed the songs over and over and over again so that you're not really thinking about the parts so much. You can, think about the other players. You can think about, interacting with the crowd, or just being, I guess, one with the music, and not so focused on, okay, here comes that chorus and I've got to do a fill right here. And I've got, when you're thinking too much about it, you might, your playing changes a little bit. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a matter of getting out of your head, I think, ultimately. On a
Exactly.
basic human level, like, okay, so that's a couple questions, but like, how do you prep for a tour? And what does like a packed bag for Jon Siren look like when you're gonna get onto the bus?
Oh, wow. Okay. So it seems like every year now, being told by tour managers that space is a major issue. And that has to do with everything. Maybe it's flights, maybe it's the weight of your suitcase, the gear that you're going to bring, the drum set I'm going to play on. Bands are wanting me for a number of reasons to scale down. And I already play a pretty minimalist kit to begin with. So, I mean, I've scaled down quite a bit and really just distilled things down to the essence of what is needed to make these songs happen, which can be kind of fun. I really enjoy the minimalist approach, so that's, but also, like I said, too, with the luggage, or maybe you're flying, but even on the bus, or maybe it's an RV, they don't want me showing up with a million suitcases or something like that. So I might get one suitcase. So it's whatever I'm wearing on stage, or hardly wearing in certain cases, because they're like, yeah, just do that no shirt drummer thing. So that's easy. The no shirt drummer things is easy, because then you don't have to think so much about, some sort of costuming, or something like that. And some bands are more relaxed, and they don't really care what you're wearing on stage so much. And but I tend to play in a lot of groups that have more of a theatrical element and a very specific look that they're going for. So I try to kind of fit with that. But with costuming too, it's like maybe you need a bunch of things on hangers, but still consolidating in space is always important. So I've got my stage outfit, mostly bring a lot of underwear and socks, because there's nothing more gross than taking a shower and then getting a bunch of dirty clothes on, and you're like, I got to wear that underwear again and flip it inside out. Or, you might not get to do laundry soup, often. So, sorry, you get disgusting on the road. So when you give
It's
us a
true.
hug, it's going to be gross, most likely.
Yes, yes.
Like,
You've been
I'm
warned.
sorry. Yeah. So there's
I
that.
do find most people like the sweaty hugs though, so yes.
So but anyway, underwear, socks, the most important thing. I have a workout outfit that I bring, and I try to do, because if I'm also hauling gear in and out of the venue, sometimes I switch into those dirty clothes, because they're just going to stay dirty and gross until I can wash them. And then I have my, oh, I'm going to meet people clothes. And so I put those on, and then I'm like, all right, I'm done meeting people. I will put those dirty, gross clothes on, because now I'm loading gear again. So I'm a little strange like that, but it allows for the laundry to not pile up. And you have moments where, if you have to be very presentable, or hey, there's a photographer that showed up that wants to shoot the band, and you don't want to, like, be wearing that gross shirt that you've been wearing all week. So, which, I've made all these mistakes. So that's why I'm saying that. But anyway, scale it
Yes.
down, be very particular with what you're going to bring, because space may be, uh, an important consideration.
Oh
And learn
yeah,
to
for
adapt.
sure.
I guess I've had to learn to adapt. Like, maybe I need two toms for a group, or I could easily use two toms, but the band's like, hey, we want to ditch that tom. We're literally cutting this down and want a really tiny kit. So I'm like, all right, I got to rework maybe some fills or grooves using just the one tom. Uh, so yeah, that's just part of the deal, I think. But yeah, anyway, learn how to break it down and be a minimalist. You know, you can't be like if you've seen Spaceballs and show up with a giant hair dryer. All right, that was a old school reference there for any of those who grew up in the 90s. I think it was in the 90s. Not sure. I forget. Anyway,
So, um, currently, what tours do you have on deck for this year?
okay. Well, I'm about to do a tour with Frontline Assembly, and we're going to go out with Gary Newman in Ministry. And so that happens in about a week, a little over a week. Um, and let's see, after that, kind of go back and forth between Frontline Assembly and Psyclon Nine in April and May, just because Frontline Assembly is doing that Sick New World Festival in Las Vegas. And just before that, I've got 2 dates in Europe. One of them is a festival, and one is in London with Psyclon Nine. And then I come back. Yeah, I do Sick New World with Frontline, and then I go right back to Europe with Psyclon Nine to do a short tour centered around us doing Wave Gothic Treffen, which is kind of it's a big goth festival. And so yeah, we do that in Germany, and about 10 days out there. There might be something in the summer that I cannot discuss because it's not locked in. Uh, I drum for several bands. Some of them people have seen me with a few times, and then there's other situations where maybe I'm a fill-in, just doing a tour, or maybe it's just a case by case scenario, like, hey, we just need a drummer on this tour. There's no strings attached, kind of thing. So anyway, there could be something in the summer. I'm waiting to find out, and it seems like it will fit in nicely between things and not interrupt anything else. And then I know IAMX has some stuff coming up. I think late August, September, something around then. And from that point onward, I don't know. I mean, I do know of stuff with IAMX in 2025, but that's, I guess way down the path. But some of the year is still open, and I try to stay pretty busy if I can. I
Yeah.
enjoy the road. There's a lot of musicians that don't really like the road because it is tough, and I think it takes like um, a certain type of person who really just enjoys doing it, especially as much as I'll go out and do it. I mean, often people are pretty happy with maybe just a tour a year or something like that. And there's a lot of musicians, I'm sure we've all met musicians that would just prefer to stay in the studio and not tour so much. So,
What is it that you love about being on the road?
uh, um, well, I never wanted to join the army necessarily, but there's something that my idea of the army, just this team camaraderie, with a goal and a focus and sort of a daily regimen that actually excites me on some level. I really like that. And I like waking up also in a different city and just, stepping off the bus or out of a hotel or something like that and being like, oh, wow, this is neat. This is, I'm in Norway. How about that? That's cool. So really enjoy that. Yeah, the routine of it all, getting better night after night as a band, that really excites me. I think that a band really starts to get tight after 3 or 4 shows. Like, I mean, we could all be professionals who've done this for a while, and so maybe it's still pretty good the first night, but there's something about, okay, now we're in a groove here, and we're really just fine tuning things, and I really like that progression that starts to happen. So yeah, if you catch a band 3 or 4 shows in and not that first one, then yeah, you're in a good place to see that group, I guess.
Absolutely. There's definitely the first pancake rule of,
Yeah,
the
it's
first
like,
show.
all right,
Yeah.
let's just go play in Bakersfield the first night. No disrespect, Bakersfield. Let's have that one show of a play, in a city that not as many people will come and see us. That's all I meant about that. And then hit the big markets, San Francisco, LA, or whatever, because usually a lot of these tours, leave from LA often. So if it's a
Yeah.
US tour, that is.
Okay, so this is a knock on wood question for you, but okay, you're super, super busy. And as we were mentioning earlier, touring is very, very like physically challenging. Have you experienced any kind of like injury or illness? And if you have, like, how do you deal with that?
Good question. Absolutely, I have. Let's see. Well, I was sick on a recent tour uh, with Psyclon Nine, so I remember that was rough. Luckily, the band helped me out. I mean, some of the groups, you carry a lot more responsibility than other groups. Like maybe some of the bands I'm in, we might have a crew that can kind of help load in and out and pack and set up stages and things like that. Uh, and with Psyclon Nine, it's a bit more DIY and it's all hands on deck. So yeah, I got sick. All of us did at the same time. It seemed like, and yeah, the show has to go on in most cases. I hate to put it that way, but I mean, it sounds like tough break, you know what I mean? So what I did was, you try to conserve your energy as best as possible. You isolate yourself, of course, so that you don't um, try to get others sick. I mean, if you're in a vehicle, I don't care if it's a bus or a van, I mean, everybody's getting exposed to whatever's happening. It's just inevitable. And your immune system is compromised on the road. You're not sleeping as well. Uh, I try to get the eating part down and the exercise, but even with that, it's my sleep. I don't sleep on buses or vans too well, so there's that. So anyway, you just have to still try to take care of business, but in order to do so, just conserve a lot of your energy, and then when there's maybe a day off, just really rest. Honestly, I think that's the best that you could do. I've also had food poisoning on the road, and that sucked.
Mm.
I remember having to do two bands that night. So after the first band, and it was the last day of tour, so you're exhausted anyway. This is another reason why I like to make my own food and not eat at restaurants. One of the many reasons, but because who knows, someone might have used the bathroom and didn't wash their hands, and then they're touching your food, and boom, you're having a moment. I'll leave it at that. But I do remember it was somewhat comical. It was terrible at the time, but I remember, I'm in set number two, and this was with Imperative Reaction, and I was playing guitar with that one, and I had a trash can in the back of the stage in a corner, and I often was going back there to vomit.
Oh,
While the set was happening. So we were just, said the show's got to go on. I've got to be in a real bad to completely cancel. Um, and sometimes people have to cancel. I mean, I don't think I've ever been on a tour where someone was in such a condition where we straight up had to cancel. I don't think I've actually experienced that, funny enough, because I've been on several tours, and I mean, there's certainly situations where people are in far worse shape.
yeah. Oh, well, we're actually getting a question real quick on Facebook from Jason Wirt.
Okay.
Asking, he says, I'm a drummer, and as I get older, the more I find I have to do exercises to warm up before a show, or my hands start to cramp at times in the show. He's asking, do you do any kind of warm up before a show?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? If you can have more gear on the road with you, then awesome. The first thing that I would do is I bring a bass drum pad with me and a practice pad and an extra stool because maybe your gear is already set up on stage and you can't really access it. And it's been, it's going to be on there for a few hours before you actually get behind the kit. So if you can get yourself a practice pad, a little setup like that, maybe a crappy, in my case, double pedal, because I do a lot of double pedal, and just get your feet and hands warmed up. And it could be, any sort of exercises or exercises that are pertinent to the type of music that you're playing. Uh, I find that really, really, really important. I do try to, and if you can't do that, let's say, just maybe you just have a pair of sticks. I would do calf raises. And so that is, like maybe if you see a step somewhere, put your feet at the edge of the step and let your body go down and up and raise. I find that calf raises really activate those muscles well. Even just doing sort of various exercises like some squats and some push-ups and things like that, get your body used to moving. Do some jumping jacks. If you have the sticks, there's usually maybe a couch backstage. Grab like a pillow from the couch and just do a lot of singles with wrists, things like that. Because yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to fire right out of the gate with a very fast song, and I've certainly cramped up
Yeah.
doing that, not being warmed up, and drink a lot of water. So I mean, you're kind of an athlete when you do this sort of thing. So I didn't really think of it in that way when I was younger, but the older you get, you're more aware of your body and what your body needs, and it's really important to just be as prepped as you can be. So yeah, that's what I would do. I mean, if you have the ability, bring that stuff. Go find a corner where you're not bothering anybody. Even go outside if the weather's not bad. In the alleyway. That's going to be me a lot of the time, and I'm just hitting things so that I'm primed and ready. And by the time you see me on stage, I've been playing the drums for 30 or 40 minutes already. If I'm lucky. If not, then it's the other stuff, the jumping jacks and all that.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed from our touring together is that you were sort of like whatever I have available. So like if you have the equipment, great, but I've seen you also use like body weight just to be able to like get warmed up as well. So
Yeah. I mean, if you can't bring resistance bands or even dumbbells, I bring all this stuff with me on the road whenever I can. If not, just get down on the ground, start doing push-ups, start doing burpees and jumping jacks and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you want to get your body primed and ready to do the thing. And especially if you're going to give people a very energetic performance for like an hour and 15 minutes, or even 30 minutes if you're a warm-up band, it's really important to um, I think to give, a high energy performance. I mean, I guess it depends on the type of music you're playing too. If you're in like a shoegazy kind of band, then I can imagine, all right, you don't need to be like wailing the ride cymbal or something like that.
that might be interesting. I mean, but yes.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen My Bloody Valentine live, and I mean, the drummer was hitting those drums.
Wow.
So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, I like my
We have
shoegaze
another
bands.
question. I do too.
Sorry,
So
there's
we got
there's
another
drumming
question.
going on. I hope that's not
Oh,
bad
you're
for
good.
anybody. Okay.
Yeah, I can't hear anything. We have a question on Twitch from Charles Boople. What do you do if you fly and your kit gets held up somewhere and you don't have drums to play?
Interesting question. Okay, so I rarely fly with drums. And one thing that I do when I'm on the road, if I have to fly to, we usually work that stuff out in advance, where there's a backline at the shows, or maybe there's even a kit in storage with certain bands. We might have a kit in Europe. So often we fly into wherever we need to be, and then that kit ends up in the trailer and off we go. So either there's a backline that's rented for the whole tour or the shows, or in some cases I have a kit in Europe, not for all the bands that I'm in, but one band, and that's what we do. But I don't usually fly with a complete drum set. I mean, that's a lot to ask of anyone. I think you'd be spending way too much money. I think that you would be better off even buying a crappy kit, which I've done before. Not me personally, but the tour will cover that cost of, okay, I'm looking at a catalog of drums that's just really cheap. Like, hey, how can we do this with a certain, in a certain budget? But yeah, once you start flying with some of that gear, it becomes quite expensive.
You're getting some love on YouTube. So Victor, so good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Victor Novatron says that he can confirm spotting Jon backstage banging on a practice pad for like an hour in the dark while the rest of the band is out eating dinner, and is giving you much respect for your dedication.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. No, I think I recall that happened not too long ago. So yeah, I was drumming in the dark. This was back in Portland, I believe, at I'm
Yeah,
trying to remember that venue. But
Coffin Pod.
yeah, there was, because it was sort of side stage in the dark. But yeah, I would often
Yeah.
do that.
Jason Campbell on YouTube is asking, have you ever added ankle weights when you do your calf raises, or when you do your calf exercises?
Yeah, the ankle weight thing's awesome, actually. If you're a person's definitely probably like a drummer, I'm guessing, but uh, I think Gene Hoglan from a number of thrash and death metal bands, he's an incredible drummer. He highly recommends the calf weight thing, and he even drums with them or practices with them. So I have done that myself, and it is a really good idea, actually. And so yeah, doing raises with a little bit of weight. It doesn't have to be ankle weights if you're doing calf raises. You could probably just do a few uh, without any weight at all, just using your body weight. But if you wanted to, if you have a dumbbell or just anything that's heavy and you want to hold it in one arm and then hold a railing or something like that, and then you could you could add some resistance to it, and that might help. So I don't try to. It becomes a fine balance because you don't want to completely work yourself out. Like if I'm going to go do a show, like even when I'm on the road, I don't do like crazy leg day workouts or anything like that, because I just find that can affect my playing a little bit. If I go really heavy duty on the legs, I will work out my legs, but I try to like keep it within reason. So, because you just don't
Yeah.
want to you just don't want to have that fatigue going on when especially if I mean, maybe if you're playing lighter music or something that's not as involved with the feet, but if you're doing something like, in my case, some of these groups have lots of double bass, and so I just want to feel not so fatigued when I'm doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a matter, I think, of having kind of the self-awareness of pacing yourself and knowing like, hey, this is going to overtax my body. So it's like a marathon, right?
Right, exactly. So you got to kind of figure out what works for you, and just what the gig demands of you. So yeah, and that's going to
So
vary from person to person.
we have a really sweet question from our dear friend Monica Lowry. What inspired you to take up the drums and become a musician?
Hey there, I haven't talked to you in a while. It's nice to hear from you. So what inspired me is I think I even wrote about this in the book. The early days of my childhood, I can just vaguely recall I had a babysitter that flipped on MTV, and I was a very young person, and obviously I wasn't really thinking about MTV. I was probably watching Sesame Street at the time. And anyway, she flipped on MTV, and I was pretty mesmerized by the videos and the music, and that right there planted the seed. And around that time, shortly thereafter, I think the song and the video that changed everything for me was Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle. It had just come out. I was really young at this time, so I don't know, I'm trying to do the math, like maybe like 8 years old or something like that when that song came out. I'm not totally sure, so I might have the years wrong. But I was young, saw that video, and I knew I had to do whatever that was. And I couldn't quite figure out which person I wanted to be within that band, but I wanted to do something. So that kind of planted the seed. I didn't come from a musical family. I mean, our family enjoyed music, but it wasn't something that anyone really pursued. So I didn't have anyone trying to coax me to go in that direction or anything like that. I had to really kind of figure it out on my own.
Yeah, I mean, would you say that was the point, or would like later on, was there a point where you're like, I'm going to music school? Um,
Oh yeah. Okay, so yeah, this is an interesting one. I got drums at an early age at one point, but I think in my childhood I had the opportunity. I can recall my parents did give me lessons. They did allow me to go get, so they were very supportive in that way. That said, I think I was mentally just struggling quite a bit as a kid. I mean, full disclosure. So it was a really difficult childhood. I was very, very depressed. There was a lot of things going on within the family, just my way of handling things. I didn't have a lot of faith in myself in general on anything. So I struggled quite a bit. Therefore, I did not practice a lot. I didn't have that much interest, and I didn't have a deep understanding of what it would probably take to pursue this in real life. I just assumed I don't know what I was thinking in my head, because I think I still wanted to be this rock star or something like that as a kid. But I just didn't understand what type of work it would take, or dedication, or lessons and things like that. So, all right. So reeling it all in, I'd say around 18 years old, uh, when I started getting more serious with bands that were touring, even though these were punk bands, and we none of us were too educated on our instruments. I mean, it was all about just making some noise and hanging out together, and we had connections to trade all these shows. So I was doing the thing. I was touring and I was performing, but honestly, I didn't really know what I was doing, and it probably showed. So that said, at a certain point, I realized I needed a lot of work, if I was going to
mm,
really do this. And so around 18, I started really, getting into lessons and actually practicing the stuff that the teacher was giving to me. So yeah, and then from that point on, I ended up at MI eventually. There was a lot of steps that brought me to MI, which is a music school. Used to be a music trade school in Los Angeles, and now it's sort of a music trade school and a degree program. So needless to say, I finished my degree by going there, and I don't honestly know how they even accepted me. I was definitely falling behind in classes, because the level that things were in, the speed that things were going, I was hanging on, you know, as best as I could. But that definitely really helped me out, and it really helped me learn how to eventually further my education by myself. And at that point, it just becomes about knowing how to put in the work, understanding, uh, I guess, how to dissect songs and know what the different parts are and things like that. I mean, it really kind of helped in a lot of those areas for me. But that said, as well, I think I could use drum lessons even to this day. There's so much that I think I could be improving on. It's just there's not a lot of time, and drum lessons are quite expensive too. So it's like, if I was going to do drum lessons, I would want to know that I'm going to be in town for a certain amount of time to really benefit from those lessons.
yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well, I definitely can say that I speak for a lot of people when you are one of the most dedicated and hardworking people I've ever known. So it doesn't surprise me at all that MI absolutely was like, yes, we want you, you know.
oh, well, thank you. Yeah, yeah. No, I
Yes.
mean, MI was fantastic. I can't say enough good things about MI. I know sometimes people will go and knock the idea of going to music schools. I mean, I've been around some of that before, and that just wasn't the case for me, of it being this kind of silly thing. I mean, I really got a lot out of that education. So yeah, I'm
So
very
we have
happy I
a
got to do it.
I agree with you in the sense that like for education, I mean, obviously I feel like we learn while we're on the road even, right? Just the live playing experiences is in and of itself an education, but it is nice when you have the luxury of being able to actually like, learn from another person, something that you don't have yourself. So, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No,
So,
yeah.
on YouTube, I'm sorry, not YouTube, Facebook, our friend Joshua Luttrell is asking a question. We're sending love, Joshua, by the way. It's really
Hey
awesome to
there.
see you on here. Says, touring is exhausting and stressful. What are some tools you use for addressing mental health and navigating conflict?
Ah, interesting. Um, okay. Over the years, you learn how to communicate better. So that is crucial. If something's really, really bothering you, I can understand if you're working for someone and you understand that there's like a hierarchy or a pecking order, maybe, you might not want to open your mouth too often. Uh, but I mean, I can understand the desire not to open your mouth. And in some cases, you don't open your mouth. If there's a problem,
Yeah,
you kind of gauge what is important to bring up and what isn't, but then also how to effectively communicate if there is a problem. Who knows what it could be? It could be anything like, oh, maybe it'd be nice to get paid more on this tour because I've been at a rate for a certain amount of time and there's inflation and blah, blah, blah. So now you have to bring up this money discussion and, how can you go about doing it in such a way that doesn't seem like that seems like you're respecting the people that you're working for, but also trying to, help yourself in your own situation out. So yeah, learning how to communicate, or if there's any sort of other issue. I mean, there's countless issues. I mean, you're all living in a vehicle together. There's, sometimes 10, 12 people in a bus or something like that. And so you're all in a tight spot. And so, yeah, learning how to communicate things like, I here's a funny one against me where people will. I used to cook on the bus. Now that's okay in certain band situations because they also do it. The rest of the band is all doing it, but I've learned my lesson to not cook Brussels sprouts or broccoli, things like that are getting steamed on a bus. So I've had people have to communicate that with me. And so I learned to just simply not cook certain things on the bus like that. Or if I'm going to do something like that, get an extension cord or go to a truck stop and then do it outside in your Instant Pot and then let it air out there. And then you're usually probably pretty good. So yeah, but people had to communicate that to me because it was something that I was doing and I just was blissfully unaware because it didn't really bother me. And but it was bothersome to many other people.
so no durian on the bus.
Yeah, probably don't bring durian on the bus. So, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of, as they say, walking on eggshells that you got to do. I mean, because, yeah, you're in a bunch of, there's a bunch of people sitting together and it's good to read the room. It's good to kind of, again, communicate well. So, if there is a problem, people could just open their mouth and say it. And then we just deal with it and there's no hard feelings and we just keep moving forward. That way we all get to, do, sort of live the way we are trying to live while coexisting together.
Absolutely. It is absolutely definitely a give and take and compromise. And I think you just hit the nail on the head when it comes to like communication really being key. Because I
Yeah,
mean, like
yeah.
you were saying earlier, it's like it's a team, right? So
Right, exactly. And sometimes you have to bring something up even with a band leader, and that could be kind of scary because you're like, I don't want to lose my gig. I've had to bring that up before, something, whatever it could be. Uh, and so yeah, you have to choose your words wisely, but again, you can't let things eat you up inside completely. If it's something that's a serious issue, it's probably worth bringing up. Uh, but try to do it in such a way where you're respectful and understanding of the person that you're talking to, while doing that. And that just takes time and experience, I think, for many people. A younger version of me, it's just, yeah, it was just a bit of more of a mess. I'm sure you've seen a million of those examples. I know that I've been a mess in the early days of Mankind is Obsolete and other groups when dealing with any sort of confrontation and or lack thereof. Maybe there was times where something, I buried something so much and just never said anything, and that can be damaging if it's really eating you up inside. So yeah, it's good to communicate, and then also be aware, try to come at things in a way that are respectful towards the other person, and allow for the people to be open about talking about things that are, I guess, maybe hot button topics. So, and having
Yeah.
just kind of a strong sense of self in a way so that you can take a bit of criticism. I think one has to be able to take a little bit of criticism too. So that's important.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think having that level of humility is absolutely vital at any level,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah. And
yeah.
it's a constant learning process and getting to know people. I mean, even though I've been touring with some of these groups for a few years now, it's just like, each tour is a brand new chapter, and it's like, okay, you know, and there will be a problem, at some point.
Hmm.
And so you have to kind of figure out how you're going to handle that, and it's all about the way you react to things. So, yeah,
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
you choose to
I
react.
yeah, how you choose to react. I think that's pretty wise because it is a choice, right? Um,
Absolutely. You might
yeah.
feel a certain way and you can't control that, but the way you choose to react is something that you can have a level of control. And I think that just takes time. I mean, younger people generally probably have a more challenging time with that just because they don't have enough experience. But we all know what happens when things just really erupt and it's not pretty, and it doesn't have to be like that. You can have a challenging conversation probably, and everybody leaves feeling a little bit better from the situation, you know.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And I think one of the things too, like, remembering that if you do have a conflict, that ultimately you're on the same page. Like you want to have an amazing, successful, musical experience together, right? So
right,
just,
exactly.
yeah,
So it's important. Yeah, definitely you know, to open your mouth, and then because yeah, sometimes you got to just let something slide, you know. But if something's like an ongoing thing, then maybe you need to bring it up. If it's something like,
yeah,
oh, that person just slammed the door one time while I was sleeping and it woke me up. Is it worth it to really go and make a big issue of it? If it's maybe an ongoing thing, then okay, cool. We'll talk about that maybe. But yeah, that would be an example of it's not worth it. Just try to go back to bed, and and that's that.
So on Facebook, we have a question from Ed Webb saying, so I recently had a band overseas ask me about music promotion to be able to tour here in the States. How does that work? Do you guys have a manager that handles all that? And I think off the cuff, like it just depends on the situation. Jon, go. You've been in all different kinds of bands and all different kinds of situations.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're looking to come to America with a band, I know it's got to be a little bit more tricky because I believe that you probably have to have work visas. It's where it's not quite. I mean, I have to have work visas for certain countries, but for many countries, for example, in Europe, I don't need a work visa. I could just go there. Uh, so that all being said, I mean, that's not the case in the UK or Turkey, and for a while when I was going to Russia and Ukraine, I needed visas and all that. So anyway, I would look into that first, see how see if because if you're going to do this on your own, that's going to be important. Kind of figuring that part out. Uh, yeah, having a booking agent definitely helps, especially when you're dealing with other countries. I think DIY booking tours within your own country is one thing because you know the terrain and there's not as much uh, there aren't as many roadblocks in front of you. I mean, but when you're having to hop on a plane and then enter through customs and immigration, it's a whole nother ball game. So you have to really set things up properly. Uh, so yeah, I would look to sorry, hold on, one of my AirPods died, so I'm just charging it for a second here. So yeah, I would try to find a booking agent, if you're trying to leave the country. But my question to you would also be, have you toured enough within your own country? Have you played enough shows there? I wouldn't start trying to focus on different countries until there's a bit more of a demand for you. But I have no idea, where you're at with it because I don't know what band this is or anything like that, and where you're at with the career on that. So anyway, I
Oh,
hope I
this
answered that. I probably didn't give the best answer for it because I know there's a lot of red tape in getting to another country. I mean, that's a huge leap. And often you need
yeah.
a bit of a team, it seems like, to make that happen.
Oh, yeah. And both ways, like whether you're going to Europe or, a European band is coming here, there's just a lot of red tape to deal with for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, we're getting a question from Dolent James on Facebook. Out of all the songs you guys have put out, which one comes to mind the most personally?
Um, hmm. That's really difficult. That's a really difficult one. I'm bouncing around between a few, so narrowing it down would be tough. Uh,
I'd say go with the few.
yeah, I mean, I went with something about Awake was, felt like really nailing an idea or a vibe down that I think, was trying, because sometimes it's been a while since I've been writing music, but often when you're writing songs, I think the thing that at least my goal is to connect with the music, be able to express myself through music in such a way that is very satisfying, like I'm really expressing myself and getting my point across and pulling together all these instruments, and it's all working together to create this image that I have in my head that I might have a hard time expressing completely, like me, because you're trying to piece together all these components. And I think with that particular song, it kind of brought it all together, just the play between all the instruments plus the vocals. And so yeah, maybe Awake. But I also think about the early days and just some of those songs, and that's a tough one. That's a tough one. But Awake really, I think, kind of landed it. It's really songwriting's really tricky because you get really attached to what you're doing, and maybe that's part of the reason why I haven't been writing music a lot, because it becomes so personal, and it affected me on such a deep level. Trying to get, like really articulate yourself through music. um so yeah, I know I went off a little bit there, but Awake was an example of, because I also didn't feel like I was ripping off some other band. There's plenty of moments, because I think that's what was also going in my head. There was other moments when I was first learning how to write where I felt like, oh wow, I'm just listening to an awful lot of this band or that band, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'm really just, we reworking some chords and sounds to create this whole thing, and not exactly kind of fully being myself. And part of this whole thing with in my younger days when I was writing a lot more music is you're really trying to discover what your voice is. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I love so much about Awake as well is that, I mean, we always use this as an intro. I mean, we've tried other incarnations, but I felt like it was always like this explosive intro that was kind of an introduction to like, this is our sound, right? And it felt like a really
Yeah.
like, yeah,
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 because that song just kicks right in. It's kind of balls to the walls, just the vibe and even to this day I think about the drum beat. And I really liked, I mean, as a drummer within the song too, it's just like I think about just, with bands that have a lot of electronic elements, at least at the time, I didn't hear ones that were so spasticky and like the drums are kind of spastic and unhinged a little bit sounding. And I don't often get to play in such a way with other electronic bands where it's just like drive that beat down the middle. I mean, that's a lot of electronic music for you, but yeah, with that one, I felt like could have this sort of unhinged vibe going on. So yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and I kind of miss that, and I really do enjoy some of that kind of stuff. And I think that that's just sort of, even that drum beat and just the way that song is, even though it turned out a completely different way, but like going into it, with the writing, it kind of reminds me of just the hardcore and the punk type of bands that I saw growing up in the 90s and that I was a part of, back in the, inept days, and when we were out with bands like Los Crudos and Hell Nation and Charles Bronson and these bands that would just play these like minute long grindcore songs, or that were had a million different little parts, and it's just like it just this ball of frantic energy, and that's just kind of how I felt. That was my mood. So you're also this is me kind of reflecting back on how I was as a younger person writing that stuff too, because I was a bit unhinged. I mean, the older you get, you mellow out a little bit because you realize that you can't kind of be in that mindset and survive almost. So like my attitude was a bit more unhinged when a lot of that stuff was written. So yeah.
Well, I think that like, you know, it is one of those things where like you are like inevitably a product of your influences, whether you're conscious of it or not, right? Like, and I think it is amazing when you reach a point because, I know that, you having really studied composition, it's like you reach a point of evolution as an artist where you're like, okay, this is actually my voice now. So I feel like that song is definitely reflective of that kind of transition point for you, as like, okay, this is where I'm actually starting to hear my own voice and really tap into that side of expression for me.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I would imagine the longer one continues to hone their craft of songwriting, they can tap into these things a bit easier. I mean, there's something beautiful and magical about the innocence of youth when you're doing this too, where you're just trying and experimenting and trying to figure out your voice, where you might come up with something that's pretty interesting and cool and that hasn't been done before because you're not really seeing any limitations or not too many of them. When you get older, you're like, oh, we can't do this because we're gonna, people aren't going to be able to define us, and it won't fit into a box that we can, market later and sell and actually have success with because it will be too all over the place. So yeah, I mean, those thoughts start to possibly come in with people as as you progress as a songwriter. I mean, maybe it doesn't for some people, but it also depends on probably what your goals are with it too. Um, if you're literally just doing this only to express yourself, if that's literally the only thing that matters, then yeah, you can pretty much do whatever you want. But sometimes when you're thinking, oh, I have to somehow impress a few people, in order to take this on the road, in order for to have booking agents want to book me and promoters want to work with me and all that kind of stuff. If you're thinking on those terms, which could easily possibly poison the writing process. Yeah, you might, the way you write things or approach things. You might try to look at the brand. I hate that word. Sorry, it's one of those things where people are like, "What's your brand, bro?" I'm like, you know. So
It's
yeah,
the Jon Siren brand.
exactly. It's just like this day I really don't like that so much. But anyway, sorry, I'm like super all over the place right now.
No, no, this is so great. We all very much appreciate you taking the time. We actually got a question from Peter per second about if you have this is all over the place. Speaking of all over the place, I'm jumping totally tangenting, but he was
Sure.
asking if you have a recipe for mapo tofu that you could share.
For what? What kind of
Ma
tofu?
Mapo, it's like a Chinese
Maple.
dish. Mapo
Oh,
tofu. I feel
I
like
do
that's like
not.
close to your baked. I feel like it's close to your baked tofu dish though. So
Yeah, yeah, and you could use, well, if you said, if I'm hearing you properly, maple, like maple as in maple syrup
mapo,
involved.
Mapo, mapo.
Oh God, I don't even know what that is. Okay, so
Yeah.
but I mean that baked tofu dish. I mean, we did a very silly video where I showed how to do this particular tofu dish. It's on YouTube somewhere. But yeah, so there's that. Um, Yeah, I'm pretty basic when it comes to tofu. It's not something that I even eat all that often. I mean, I love
Mhm.
tofu, but um I don't seem to make a lot of tofu dishes. I mean, I do make some very basic stir fries within it on occasion. And yeah, the bake, if I have access to an oven, I will bake some tofu because that's always nice. And then you can use that for a variety of things if you want to make sandwiches or whatever. So.
Yes, it is. It is very good. That and other recipes are in the Touring Vegans, which highly
Yeah,
recommended. Yes.
yeah, there's a lot of recipes. Now, granted, a lot of that stuff is, things that you could do in a rice cooker or an instant pot. Uh yeah, a lot of what I do cooking wise now is just revolved around those devices because I bring those things on the road with me. Because I mean,
Yeah.
you have to be able to just throw a bunch of stuff into a pot and hit go and then start doing your day. Often when I don't have time to be super gourmet about things when I'm on the road. So often it is something like, oh, beans and rice with vegetables, just done up in various ways. We're going to use Indian spices today, or we'll use more of a Mexican vibe or a Creole vibe. So yeah, but it's all the same kind of stuff. So
What food staples do you bring with you on tour? Like in terms of
uh,
not just the food, but also the actual like tools.
yeah, yeah. So nowadays it's the instant pot.
Hmm.
There's a massive space consideration, in which case I will at least bring one of those tiny rice cookers that you could probably get at Target or Walmart or something like that. So I will bring one or the other, and then I will bring oats with me. I'll bring rice with me, and I'll bring lentils just because lentils can cook just as fast as like brown rice. But those end up being my staples, and then from that on, I will uh, get fruit and veggies I might bring I might make a spice blend because I'm not going to bring like a cabinet full of spices. So the food will get a little monotonous on the road for myself, but I just don't care because I prefer to stay, doing the vegan thing, and I want to have control over uh sodium levels, and I don't add oil to my food. So if you go to restaurants, you're going to get a lot of oil in your food. So I eat a very particular way due to health reasons, health goals, and to stay in a certain way. I'm trying to avoid heart disease, which is very common, especially with men in my family, and especially at my age. So
Mhm.
I really am doing my best to keep cholesterol levels down and avoiding a lot of saturated fat and sodium. So anyway, yeah, I eat a monotonous sort of diet when I'm on the road in order to kind of conserve space, not bring a lot of stuff with me, and not to also not have to spend a whole lot of time doing any sort of preparation.
Well, I imagine it
So
also frees up your mental bandwidth, so you don't really have to think about it too much, you know.
yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm not going to compare myself to Einstein, but I guess I'll compare but from what I heard, he wore the same outfit every day. So when you
Hmm.
don't have to think, when you don't have, I think there was a term for this when it was like choice fatigue or something like that. You can really kind of wear yourself out, I suppose, trying to constantly create all this tremendous variety. I don't think that we need tons and tons of variety when it comes to health and nutrition. I think that, I mean, sure, some might argue for the gut microbiome to have a variety of different types of fiber down there, and that makes some sense. But I think that you can still be pretty healthy eating the same few things every day. So yeah,
This is a really
sorry,
cool
my
question from
AirPods.
oh
Yeah, yeah.
so Zach Weiss is asking what advice would you have for someone wanting to transition to a plant-based diet?
Okay, cool. I would say first of all, find a few recipes that you really enjoy. Um, and I would read a few books. I anything I really Dr. McDougall. I've been reading his books for a while now, and I really recommend what he has to say. I think that there's a lot of logic, there's a lot of science behind what he has to say, and I think that he can put it in a way that is digestible for someone who doesn't have like some biochemistry background. Um, so yeah, I would check out books by Dr. McDougall, and I would one moment. Okay, sorry, getting a message there. Um, and find a few recipes that you really enjoy and just start there. Like I would try to figure out like what do you like for breakfast. For me, it's pretty much the same thing every day. I eat and I'll add frozen berries and banana and maybe on occasion some sort of like either walnuts or flax seeds or something like that. And I usually have like cinnamon in it. And it's pretty basic. That's just it. That's breakfast pretty much every day. Occasionally I might make a tofu scramble or something like that, or a breakfast burrito using, tofu and just various vegetables and doing that up in a skillet and then wrapping it in a tortilla. So uh so that's generally what I do for breakfast. And then, just find something that you could do for lunch and dinner that you really enjoy. And just, figure out a few recipes. If you have even 5 or 6 recipes under your belt, or even less in some cases, you'll probably do just fine. Um, I find that the social element of being vegan or plant based ends up being the thing that's the real challenge. I think feeding yourself, as long as you're somewhat savvy in the kitchen and you could do at least like, I know how to boil rice, or I know how to, make mashed potatoes or something like that. As long as you know a few basic things that are going to be the foundation of your meal, um, you should be all right. I think the social angle ends up being like a bit more of the tricky part of this to navigate through.
Yeah, for sure. As I think one of the things I love about Anthony Bourdain, he talks about just how eating is part of socialization. There's a sort of tribal connection, that we all have around eating and then being in the kitchen together. So,
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a great way to bond. It's a great way to express yourself. I mean, cooking is an art as well. I mean, sometimes, even if it's, yeah, I'm throwing a bunch of stuff in a pot, because even people that are, you know, chefs and everything like that. I mean, I've heard interviews and they'll be like, sometimes I'm just so busy that all I'm doing is just making, a quick pasta with marinara, and maybe, maybe their way of jazzing it up is, oh, I grilled some broccoli and I threw that in there, whatever the case may be.
Yep.
So, I think I agree with that.
Um, so a couple of things. One, I haven't mentioned this yet, but if y'all want to learn more about Jon, you can go to jonsiren.com. That's JONSIREN.com. That has all of his social links. It also has a link to the Touring Vegan, the book that he wrote. So like you can check out all the things on there, and stay connected. And I think you also have a contact. So if people want to contact you for drumming and lessons and things like that, they can contact you there, right, Jon?
Yeah, my Gmail account's there. I'm pretty good about answering, even if someone DMs me on Instagram or Facebook and things like that. I generally can answer uh, questions there too.
Yes. Um, Second thing, Wari Guns from Algeria was saying hi, and just wanted to say hi back. And we absolutely would love to return to Algeria, and sending a lot of love your way. We're also getting some love from Yolanda.
Oh, hey.
Yes, she had some questions. One of them was, what has been one of the best shows that you've had outside of the US?
Okay. I'm always going to remember just about every show that I've done in Moscow, to be perfectly honest. Um, there's something about uh, those shows. I think this was at the IMX. Even our final headlining show there was just out of control. I mean, um, just the way that the people are that come to the shows, they're just so enthusiastic. Um, their enthusiasm was, really just took the show to a whole nother level. The only way to describe, I can't really describe it too well. I mean, but cause it's one of those things where you have to sort of experience it to understand. But I can think of other gigs that I've really enjoyed. But yeah, certainly those Moscow shows. Um, where else? I mean, I've definitely hit some really exotic and interesting regions where maybe it was just all of that mixed in there really got me excited. Like, being in Jyväskylä, Finland, or, which I've always had an interest in Finland because my dad's side of the family is from there. So, playing shows there always, you get like some sort of emotional or spiritual, whatever you want to call it, connection to I guess sort of our origins, and knowing that a good part of, I guess, the gene pool that I came from, uh was in Finland. I guess getting to finally experience Finland, and especially in the winter time, because I always had these ideas of, oh wow, look at this country that's so far north, it's got to be freezing and like covered in ice, and that was really exciting to me. So, being up there in the middle of the winter and it's just completely frozen, and then walking on a frozen lake near the venue, that was really exciting too. So, um, but yeah, I mean, there's been so many fantastic shows though. I don't even know. There was a show I did it as well in Sao Paulo, Brazil, with Information Society. That was really intense and awesome. And I just remember, the crowd just kind of broke through the barricades and then was just sort of surrounding the band on stage. And we did the show even, and there was people standing this close to me as I'm drumming, just like yelling into my. So I mean, like, you have crazy moments. It felt like a punk rock show, but there was, several thousand people in this outdoor stage area. It's pretty intense, but having that kind of energy was sort of fun too. It was scary because you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, they literally smashed through the barricades, and they were hanging out with us, but everyone was respectful. Like, like no one was like just then jumping on my drums or something like that. They kept enough of a distance, I suppose, so that I could perform. But yeah, that was cool.
That's pretty amazing. And I have to say, like, from going from your early live show days with Inept and Medium to like that moment. I mean, that's such a jump, right? Like amazing, you know, jump, even though you come from the same, roots. And like you were saying, it feels very punk rock, but there's still that love and passion that's like right there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and I was describing some of these bigger shows with these huge crowds, but I mean, like, I really like the energy of, yeah, I mean, those punk rock shows are what shaped me, so I like playing on the floor, for instance. So if I'm ever in this situation, which will sometimes happen, you'll be on the road and then you get booked at some strange venue that isn't even a venue really. And then that might even be the setup. And it's like, oh wow, this is like some weird oddball show on the tour. And just being in a situation like that where the crowd is sort of surrounding you. And I like that as a drummer. I mean, one thing that's kind of bad about doing some of these mega huge gigs, is yeah, especially as a drummer, they might be like a good 50 feet away from me or something like that. And so it's like, even though you're feeling this powerful, exciting, like thunderous drum, like you hit the kick drum and it's just like boom, and you could feel it shooting off wherever, the back of the room. And I don't know, that's exciting, but but feeling people's energy and having it like really close while you're doing it is also quite fun. So yeah. Anyway, I like it
Okay.
all.
I do too. I feel like it's just like when you find the joy and the love in live music, it's just across the board, it always kind of feels like a joy.
Yeah, I mean I mean, I'd be lying to say that I haven't had moments where I'm like, oh God, this gig's gonna maybe suck, because nobody showed
Hmm.
up or whatever.
Yeah.
um, you have to kind of pull yourself out of that mindset because, I can recall a couple of badass shows that I saw as a kid where maybe there was like six of us in the room or something like that, but the band still delivered the goods as if it was a packed room. And it didn't seem contrived or anything either. It just seemed very genuine. Um, and I have to remember that as a person who's performing too, that, yeah, I'll probably play in front of six people again at some point. I'm sure there's definitely been gigs even in my recent past that have not been well attended. So, and yeah, you got to just, if you are struggling with it as a performer, it's good to just kind of be like, all right, let's break it down. Like, I'm getting to perform music for a living and I'm getting to, share this experience with the people that are here. Let's have a good time. Let's not think, oh my God, the promoter's going to hate us and we'll never get booked here again. And all these other, kind of poisonous thoughts that might be entering your mind. You at a certain point, you have to kind of push that stuff away and I guess deliver the goods to the people that are there and really try to enjoy the moment too. Because there's also nothing worse if you're like someone watching the group and in the group you could tell the band's just like over it and they're which I'm sure someone has seen me out there being like, ugh, because we're human and once in a while you let the negativity get to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. Yeah, I think that it's sometimes just a matter of really just presently checking in and being like, all right, let's keep myself in check here. Remember the big picture, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm having to keep switching my AirPods because they just
Yeah,
don't stay alive.
all good. Well, in terms of like any pieces of wisdom that you could share with other aspiring musicians, or even something that you would share with younger John. Maybe it could be both, or the same thing. Like, what wisdom would you share?
The first thing that came to mind is I guess I look at the areas where I could use improvement. I just can't help but think about trying to improve certain things. So uh, I would say learn to be disciplined and organized, because it's going to take, it's going to take some of that to really lift this off the ground, whatever it is that you're trying to do. But don't let that kill the joy. So if you can sort of, I don't want to say mindlessly do some of that, but there's certain things about being a musician that I'm not exactly, pumped about. Like, I don't really like marketing myself. I don't
Mhm.
really, I struggle with social media and things like that. I don't enjoy doing that too much. I mean, I like it sometimes, but then there's other times where you're, you can get a little obsessed, or one can, or I can, I don't know. Oh my God, I didn't get enough likes today. Everybody hates me. It just, you know, so anyway, but that all said, just, it's like, we got to do certain things. We got to get the word out there that we're doing something. I can't just be like, this is all happening, and you have to figure it out. So there might be areas that maybe you're not interested in, or maybe, like me as a younger person, I wasn't interested in practicing. But, if you want to be able to play certain types of music or whatever, you've got to practice, and you've got to have a little bit of discipline. So I would tell young Jon to learn how to be organized and a little bit more disciplined. And this is where it becomes kind of an interesting balance, because yeah, you don't want to kill the fun and the excitement of just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, because I think that there's a beauty to in a joy to just simply being very open to various things, and not um getting behind the kit and only doing these, like, oh my God, I have to play double bass at 210 BPM for this song, and just every day you're just, that's all you're doing. You have to kind of, you know, always maybe sometimes keep yourself in check and remember what brought you to music anyway. And that'll happen, especially if you get like really obsessed about something and you're doing all the hard work to make something happen. You don't want to lose the joy and the innocence. Put on a record. Even if maybe I'm talking to someone who's a little bit older that might now who might have done all the hard work, and maybe they're starting to get out there and do stuff, and it's like, oh my God, this is really difficult to do this, and to
Mhm.
really gain a following and have people listen to what it is that I want to say. And um I would say, yeah, put on some music that got you into it to begin with. Sometimes you need a night where you're just hanging out and like going through an album or something, or maybe you have a long drive ahead of you and just like going front to back on some record that you just always listened to as a kid. So I think that's really important. um yeah, I don't know if I answered that completely.
Oh
uh
yeah, beautifully. I think
yeah,
it really is going back to the roots is just nothing like feeding the heart and soul that way.
absolutely, yeah. And and if you're a songwriter, experiment a bunch. It's what spend the time to maybe have a time where you're not um uh focused on maybe songwriting, but learning some gear a bit. I know, maybe separating that a bit, like, oh, today I'm not writing, I'm just trying to understand how to use Pro Tools or something a little bit more. Like, maybe I'm trying to learn how to, because that can really be fatiguing as well too. And I remember that being a struggle of mine when I was trying to write music. I would hit so many roadblocks because I just didn't understand something with the devices I was using to try to, record things into, like I would hit some sort of a roadblock. Um, and that always sucked, and it would kill the creativity for the moment. So maybe just having days where you're like, all right, I'm going to tackle how to, I don't know, edit drums or something like that. So
Mhm.
if I'm programming some drums, I can, or whatever you're doing, it could be anything. Just something about understanding how the gear works a little bit more. So yeah,
Yeah, just taking the time to take little simple small steps instead of feeling like you're having to conquer that mountain all at once.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for joining us, y'all. Thank you all for tuning in with us. This is our very, very first episode on the Tour Router channel. If y'all do YouTube, if you want to subscribe to the channel, we're going to be doing our next interview. We're going to be doing these every other Sunday at 3 p.m. The next guest is going to be Jared Christensen from the metal band Archaic, sharing his experiences with being a live musician and being on tour. And thank you all for your amazing, thoughtful questions, for your wonderful, kind, loving support. We've been, so grateful from all of our communities who have supported us through the years, making this possible. Jon, thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing your amazing self and your incredible wisdom. Are there any final thoughts that you want to share out with us?
Um, I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, just I hope to see people when I'm on the road. I hope people continue to support live music because then that allows me to continue to do what I love to do, which is, perform for people and travel and um yeah, no, it really helps that there's people out there that support so much and I mean it's the cliche thing that you hear from musicians like we appreciate you buying the merch and buying the concert tickets because that's basically what keeps this train going. So yeah, I appreciate the support everyone's given me this far and hopefully it continues to happen because I'd rather not be doing something different with my life. I hope to continue to do this and grow and develop as a musician and continue to hit a lot of these cities that I go to and hopefully hit some different ones too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it's, like you were saying, it's all of the support makes it possible. And in small levels and big levels, like it's all felt. And I think I speak for all of us when yes, we would love to see what's in store for you as well in the coming years, because I feel like you've been such an inspiration on all the levels, and you continue to evolve. So yeah,
Thank you.
All right.
thank you. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank
Stupid
you all
AirPods.
so much. Thank you all so much for tuning in for our first tour router, Unwritten Rules of the Road, and sending y'all lots of love. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday and an amazing week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.